Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. We are back here for the Teaching Montana History online professional learning community. We're going to focus on reading strategies today. I'm Colette, and Christy Mockstutz is here to share her wonderful knowledge with us, and Martha Cole is here as well. So we can probably go ahead through the slides.
Trying to do that. There are hosts, sorry. It was not catching up with us. There's the hosts. Here we are. This is what we're talking about.
And we just want to always make sure that you have that link back to the Montana Stories of the Land website and online teaching guide. So that's something that we can all go back to as a basic resource.
All right. Well, we will. Martha, do you have anything else to add? I think we'll go ahead and jump right into the content of today's. Martha had set up the Write Your Way In document responding to these questions. How you use textbooks in class, and what reading strategies do you use to help students get the information they need from the book? And Martha asked me to come as sort of a guest speaker today to talk specifically about reading strategies in these social studies textbooks that often are sort of grade levels above where our students are reading, and how do we get our students to access the content that we want them to access, meeting their needs from the reading level standpoint, and finding that balance between teaching reading strategies and learning content. And when I looked in the Google document, several of you had responded back to these questions very thoughtfully. And I'm going to pull that over so you can all see the Google document if you don't have it up. The link is available in our hub course, so if you're watching this recording later, you can see that. But you can, Martha shared a lot of really wonderful resources from Tammy Elser about the structure of authentic literacy, and I think this is a great resource, and the link is right here for that. And also we have some responses, and one thing that sort of seemed to be a common theme was, how do you find the time? How do you make sure that students are understanding and comprehending what they're reading without overwhelming them, but yet keeping that challenge? And I think there's some really great answers in here. We have comments back and forth. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and talk about maybe something they wrote or something they read here in this Google document before we go on.
I guess one thing that I've been hearing a lot from teachers is that the reading level of the textbook is too high for middle school, and I think that was one of the things that Tammy was finding, and I absolutely don't want to deny anyone's actually lived experience with middle school students, but I do want to just note that I think that that people should base their feelings on this based on their experience with their own students and not on an arbitrary Lexile level. We did get it tested by Lexile. It tests at, I think it's 1080, but that's way higher than it should be. And we talked to some people about why that was, and one reason is that vocabulary is defined in parentheses right in the text, which is great for students. It allowed us to use some subject-specific vocabulary. Things like allotment, for example, wouldn't necessarily be a 7th grade vocabulary word, but it makes it complicated for the Lexile to grade it. For one thing, the sentence structures become much more complicated and much longer when you have definitions, in-text definitions, plus, of course, some of the vocab is higher level vocab, although defined. So I hope that that's something to keep in mind, just that it has to do with your students and where they're at and the struggles that they're having or not having, and then finding strategies to work with them as opposed to kind of an arbitrary score.
Yeah, I agree. I think about 80% of my kids could read this no problem, but it's the 20% who are the real low readers, and those are the kids who we would always like to provide an audio digital file for them to listen along or whatever. Reading is always done in the classroom, which is fine, and it works. The copy that I got from Sue Daly is almost too low for some of my kids. When she rewrote the first section, it seems a little low. So, there's not really, I don't know, neither one's great. I've used the text for 5 years now, and I haven't really struggled with it, but those kids that really struggle to read do struggle.
Well, the other thing that I would point out is that for kids who have learning disabilities like dyslexia or any kind of other reading disability, might want to think about working with your school to work with Learning Ally, because the text is available as an audiobook through Learning Ally.
Yeah, and I just found that out the other day, I think through this class or somewhere I found that out. So I did contact our principal about that. So yeah, that'd be awesome. I think that was really, and at that point, I think whoever was saying they taught fourth grade, even at that level, I think they had an audio copy that it would be manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So
that sort of leads to my finding balance slide. And I kind of took this from some of the comments and exactly sort of what we're sort of wrestling with this a little bit in this conversation. And one thing is finding that time, teaching the reading strategies versus teaching the content area, and how do you marry the two together so that you don't feel like you're using up valuable time. And I think I would say don't be afraid to use the social studies text in reading. It sounds like, Tammy, you probably do, but just I think in general, don't be afraid to bring a page from the social studies text into reading as a sample, because like Martha pointed out, a lot of times those vocabulary words have the definition in parentheses right after, so that's a great reminder for students if they come to a word that they don't understand. Well, keep reading, because often the definition will come after, particularly in an informational text or a textbook setup. And so that's just sort of that reminder for students to kind of keep reading and see if it gives them the answer to that definition, within the text. Reminding students to back up and reread, read aloud. I know, Tammy, I think you said in your response that you work in small groups and have students read together, and I think that's a great idea. They hear it, they can read it, they're working together on that. And the more times we expose them to the text, the better that is. And so if you think that in the morning, maybe during reading time, you bring the sample text in and you use that just specifically for a specific reading strategy, some small part of it. But then later in social studies, if you have your day divided up that way, later in social studies, perhaps then the students see this again and then they said, oh, that's familiar. They've already heard it. You talked about it in class. They had a reading strategy to kind of attack that text with, and then it makes them easier. And then they're getting exposed to that text more than once, and that will help those struggling readers by getting that repeated exposure to the text. I think that's just one way to manage that, and just consistently reminding them to look for those bold words, those glossary terms, and remembering that I think less is more, I think, in finding that balance of time. Chunk out the textbook when you need to and really hone in on those important points. So I think that's sort of one answer, that just my top tip of the iceberg sort of ways to help find balance in the classroom. But I did come with a couple of strategies today that are hopefully helpful to all learners in accessing texts that might be challenging for them to read. And one is using, this is sort of graphic organizer specific, but it's deciding and showing students how predicting leads to summarizing. And what I mean by that is that it's important when you're making predictions to give students enough information from the text to actually make a prediction. So that means have them look at the text, have them look at specific textual clues and cues such as captions, titles, that sort of thing, and then make informed predictions about what they're going to read. Then the next level is to have them go back and read their prediction after they've read the text and see if they were right, and have them adapt that or adjust that prediction to correctly reflect what they just read in the text. And again, if you think about that, we're exposing them to the text in a couple of different ways: that sort of overview look at it, then a deeper reading, and then going back and analyzing, hey, did my prediction match up with what I actually read? So we're giving them multiple chances to enter that text from different perspectives. So, and here's the example of what I mean. If we look at this selection from the textbook, you can see that this particular page has a title, it has some bold words, it has a subtitle, it has a caption, and it has an illustration. And I have a predicting organizer for informational text, and I kind of geared this organizer directly to those middle school grades. And what you want the students to do first, and of course you would model this with them, have them maybe do it in whole group or in at first, and then maybe doing it in partner work and small group, sort of giving them that responsibility, but definitely modeling it sort of in a whole group setting at first. But have them preview the features of the text. That might be the author, the illustrations, captions, titles, subheadings, bolded words, graphs, photos, that kind of thing. So if we look at this piece, we're only going to have them focusing on what we can see right here. And you would have them read, maybe read aloud the caption, maybe read aloud the subtitles, look at those bold words. Have them look at that picture, look at that photo, and what is that photograph showing us? And so what you might say is, smoke from the smelters darkened the skies and killed plants and wildlife near industrial sites, but it also symbolized employment to people who needed to earn a living. America Transformed is the title. When we look at this picture, you can talk about what you see. You see that smoke going in. It looks dirty. It looks like there's pollution going on. We know that that's bad. That's background knowledge that our students, I would already have. And so have them, from what we've just read and looked at, now make a prediction. What do we think we're going to learn in this article? And you would have them write their predictions here, maybe a few lines. Unfortunately, I can't write with this tool, but this is where you would write predictions. And one prediction you might write that they might say is, industry was bad for America. It polluted the air. So they might write that here as what they think that this is what we're going to learn in this article. You might probe them to be a little bit more specific. Then what happens is you ask them to read the article. So this may be, it's a short piece. As the teacher, depending on if you think students can access it, you can read it aloud to them. You can have them read in partners. You can have them read it to themselves, whatever you're comfortable with that. Then you have them come back and look at their predictions and have them adjust their predictions to what they actually read in the text. And so say they did say up here, oh yes, the industry was bad for America because it polluted the skies. Well, that was sort of true, but part of that was not true because it wasn't only bad, it was also good, because down here it talks about how it was good for our economy. So we need to adjust this prediction, so give it a check there, and then have them right here that adjusted prediction that reflects what was in the text. So this gives them, as you can see now, a couple of different times to go back to the text. On the next slide, I went ahead and presented an organizer that I filled in that I thought could be sort of something that middle school students would maybe come up with. And if you look at the black text here, the predictions were industry hurt America, pollution was a problem, people made money but environment was hurt. And what I wanted to show you here was that then I went ahead and adjusted this prediction and said, well, industry hurt America, but it also had positive effects, like it developed x-rays and it created jobs. Pollution was a problem, people did make money, but people were also hurt with the longer work hours and poor conditions, and you can see that I had to adjust that prediction as well. One thing I like to include at the bottom of an organizer when I'm talking about predicting and analyzing and what students read was anything that was unexpected. And one thing that I think students would talk about was maybe that many workers were immigrants in this particular article. It talked about that. They might say that. Now, this is where the summarizing comes in. After you've had students go back and correct their predictions up here and including what they found unexpected, they now can come down here to the bottom and write a summary using the words that they had up here. They now then write a summary about this section. And so that's how predicting, analyzing your prediction, going back to the text and reviewing it for accuracy can then lead you to a built-in summary of those key details from the text. And I find that for students this is really helpful in that sort of idea that it's okay to go back to the text and look for information and clarify information for themselves. A lot of times they try to think they have to have it all here in their head, but this is just that great reminder. Go back into the text. Is that what the text really told us? No, actually it said it was positive and negative. So let's clarify that and write that in our summary. So that's one sort of strategy. It's actually sort of two combined into one, predicting, moving into summarizing. What can happen then in a textbook like this is you can have certain sections that students have done this predicting activity, moved into summarizing, and sort of collect them, and then at the end of a unit they'll have several summaries of the key ideas that they created for a unit, that they have those real key ideas from that unit there, and that can help them then do a further assignment or a writing assignment or continue on from there. The next strategy I think is very helpful for struggling readers, particularly when we think about the vocabulary. Martha mentioned that there is higher level academic vocabulary throughout this textbooks, and that is where students can get really stuck not knowing what that word is. So one strategy that I find successful for students is imaging and sort of making a map of a particular section. And so for this strategy, you would take a selection of text, and students either find the repeated words, or maybe in a textbook situation it's those bolded words that show up. They just do a skim read, and you make a list of those important words from the text. This is where the teacher does come in handy in sort of helping the students, particularly at first, make that list of words that's really important for this piece of text. Then you leave that list of words there. You may write the words on cards, and I'll show you an example of this in a little bit, but you have a list of kind of the key words. Then you go back and have the students read the text closely. Again, partners, whole class, small groups, you may read it aloud, then you may have them read it with partners. Because it's short selections, again, having them do a repeated reading, especially if there's dense information there, could be really helpful for them. Then this is the part where the vocabulary and that acquisition of language starts to come in. I have students go, and for each of those words that we identified as the key words, they have to make a very quick little picture that represents that word. For instance, I will show you in the next sample, they'll make just a very quick visual image for the words, and then they put those images together in a map that makes sense to them. So for instance, let's take a look, and we'll start with this one. I have political reforms, power to the people sample from the textbook. You notice that there's a title, there's a caption, there are several words that are bolded here. So if I asked you to go ahead and we're not reading yet, we're just actually going ahead and calling out some of these words. What are some of those words that you see on this page just at a quick glance?
Repeal.
Repeal.
Bribed. Suffrage.
Bribed. Suffrage. Referendum. Elections. Initiative. So those are some of the words that you would pull out and make a list of. And I made a sample here. And then you would have the students go back and read. Now these are these words in particular, I would probably, give them the definitions, talk about them, and then have them go in and read the text or read the text with them. It depends on where the students are and where you think they can understand this. But then have them go back and read the text. Give them that moment to go back and read the text again. And then I made a quick list of words. I didn't get all of them that we identified, but these were the ones that I just pulled out at a quick glance. And what I did then was I made pictures here that you can see here on the screen. I'm going to try to use the laser pointer, see if this will work. You can see here on the screen. And in general, we would not use any words for mapping out what this section of text actually taught us. I had a little trouble sort of sometimes kind of understanding. I thought, well, maybe I should use some words. But in general, you would encourage your students not to use words in this. They would just use connections. And so you can see I have the people wanted more power. And so when they found that they have the right to vote, they wanted to be more specific, and they passed laws for primary elections. I'm not saying the words quite properly here, but this is the electing a senator directly. They now have the right to, this is the initiative. They can say yes or no to an initiative, even if the legislature doesn't want it. And this is the referendum. They can recall something. So these are the pictures that I sort of put together to go with the words over here. And by my map, I started to put together and comprehend what that section was telling me. And this is the memory that I then get in my head. And students theirs will not look like this. Their map will look different. It might be a circle, it might be a star, it might be a linear line, depending on how they think the concepts come together and what links they can see between the concepts. So this to me is a very powerful way for students who struggle to read to start to access and visualize what these words mean and their relationship to each other. And as you can see, I just used index cards and moved it around on a paper. Students can, easily make that themselves on index cards at their desks and work with a partner and come up with a map at their desk. And so that's a way to do that.
I really like that. I really like that a lot, Christy, because it puts that learning really squarely in the students' minds, and we're just supporting them through these strategies and really getting them into the ideas. And I think hopefully too that when the topic is something that has either a current events connection or it's something that they're really engaged or excited about, that these strategies are just going to further kind of solidify and bring the ideas that we want them to learn into that learning space for them. So I really like this example.
Well, I hope it's helpful, and I hope that you can take something away and use this in your classroom. And my information is somewhere here in the PowerPoint, I believe, and you can always find me on the Learning Hub too and email me with any questions.
And
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I think when I say the book is, or the textbook is hard to read, what I really think I mean after listening to this is that it's hard for students to take notes on, and this is just an amazing tool. I've tried providing notes, guided notes, having students take notes, writing summaries. None of it's worked, but I really like this, so I'll give it a shot.
Well, and Tammy, the other thing I'm wondering, though, about notes is because of Sue Daly, the subheads are really clear. Like, we had big fights when we were creating the textbook about whether we could be metaphorical in the subheads, and she said no. And so I wonder if the students just copied the subheads.
Right.
If that's almost the notes that they
It is. That and the vocab, yeah, I think so. And then during this outlining, this mapping, that's pretty powerful because the images, yeah, I like that.
And Tammy, I have used that with 5th grade English learner students, and it was very successful in them accessing text in a new way. And again, that idea of giving them permission to have different entry points into the text, I think, is so key for comprehending. And it takes practice. It's not a one-shot kind of thing. You do have to kind of come back and do it several times, but then the students start to understand that they can create the map that suits them, and it's right, and so I have had personal success with it.
Right.
And the only other thing that I'm going to say in terms of the textbook that I think is relevant to this is that there's 2 types of vocabulary words in the textbook. There's subject-specific words and they're just general vocabulary words. One is in red and one is in black. They're both bold. But that kind of lets you separate out, a cool adjective like plucky and something like seed, that you really need to know to understand social studies.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Martha. I had meant to say that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
So can you provide copies of that predicting organizer for information like that?
Yes, Tammy, and you can email me, but we're also going to put it on the Learning Hub under this course on the Hub, so you'll be able to get it in both ways.
All right. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the recording and any of the materials, the PowerPoint slides, and then the materials that Christy has prepared will be in that course. So that's why we just want to always remind, for the sake of the recording, and then also for those who are with us live, that the course itself on the Teacher Learning Hub folds in all of these pieces, and it's a way to easily access the information after we sign off today.
All right, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was really useful.
Oh, I'm glad. I hope so. Thank you for joining, everybody.
Yeah, so I think, do you want to go to the last couple, through the last couple
Yes.
slides in the deck here, make sure we get it all in, enroll in that course, and if you're listening to the recording, you always have the opportunity then to do the Write Your Way In activity and then writing your way out as well. And then if we keep going forward, you'll see what that looks like in the course. And the Write Your Way Out question is, what new reading strategies are you going to try with your class? Christy was wonderful in helping us see a couple of strategies that she's been really successful with. So when you write your way out in the course, hopefully you can share some other strategies with other participants that they can use as well. And I think there's one more slide. There's Christy's information and Martha's information, and so you'll have access to that. And if we keep going again, we will see you not next month. We are not going to convene in December. I can't believe it's already that time, but we'll see you again in January to continue our conversation. So we really appreciate your time, and we will see you in January.